Hey everyone! For this episode of Dungeon About, we talk about Frostblood, the first book in the Frostblood saga written by Elly Blake. As usual, there's going to be light spoilers in this one, so you have been warned. I read this book while I was a bit sick and feverish, and you might still hear a little bit of that in the podcast, so I apologize for that. In the second half, we talk about Gothic, the 25-year-old role playing game, which we still love and which Vincent has tried out and tells us a little bit about. If you enjoy fantasy novels and really old RPGs, I think you will enjoy this episode of A Dungeon About. Let's get right into it, okay, shall we? This is a bit of a book segment, which is new, but I guess it does say storytelling in the podcast description. Also, you'll see in a moment why I bring this up. There's a hidden reason why I bring this book up. But, so, I was sick, as I mentioned, last week, and the week before, sort of. Occasionally, you'll still hear that. But in my sort of, so most of the time I was just in bed. But in my sort of fever haze, I decided to read a book as an audiobook, which I haven't done in a long time. And this has been on my list. This is what I read was Frostblood of Elly Blake is the author, I believe. And this is part of her Frostblood or Fireblood, I can't remember, saga. And the first book, which I believe is called Frostblood, came out in 2017.
Okay.
And
how many books are there?
I think it's a trilogy. I think there's 3 books. I haven't even quite finished the first one, but though I did read a bunch of it. Like I'm not completely through with it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the titles of the 3 now.
Yeah, what are the titles?
Frostblood,
Yeah.
Fireblood, and Nightblood. And
Dude, that makes complete sense. Yes, I understand now why they're called that.
the images on the titles are a frozen rose, a burning rose, and a black rose.
It's kind of nice. Yeah. So these are fantasy novels, and like this was quite delicious to me. I haven't read like just a proper good old fantasy novel in a long time.
How fantasy are they?
They are they are the most fantasy
With
of
elves
fantasy
and dwarves
No,
and
okay.
magic on...
Good point, actually. So I believe that's what you would call high fantasy, right? They're not that, although they might still be sort of high fantasy. I'm not sure what the taxonomy there is exactly, but they're also not modern fantasy a la Dresden Files and stuff, right? It's like you're in a different world, don't know what it's called, and the world has like kingdoms and stuff. I guess, to cut a long story short, like the central tension in the book is between so-called Frostbloods and Firebloods, okay? And like these are just people with magic powers. Frost and fire. It's you think it's not that, but it's exactly that. You know what I mean? They can just throw fire
Let me
and
guess,
stuff.
there's a third kind that is called Nightblood. And
Okay,
they're probably
spoilers.
really rare.
Spoilers, okay? Again, we always do this. Like we're going, just like Dune, we're going to spoil Frostblood and the Fireblood saga for you, at least a little bit. I can't spoil it that much because I haven't read all of it, but spoilers might come up. So just be warned. Yeah, it's that kind of fantasy, right? With like kingdoms and like people have magic and stuff. And we follow. I'm going to give you a little bit of synopsis, okay? So you
Yes,
know,
hit me.
but just a little bit. Don't worry, I'm not going to narrate the whole book. But we follow the path of Ruby, who is like a Fireblood girl, but so she can like manipulate fire and stuff, right? And she's like very hot and stuff. I mean, like, temperature wise.
But in the first book that is called Frostblood,
Yes.
we follow a Fireblood.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Let me explain to you why. Because she grows up in the Frostblood kingdom, in the kingdom of the Frost people,
of
and she has to
course.
hide her powers. And there was a big like civil war, not a civil war, just a war, I guess, between the Frostblood people and the Fireblood people and stuff. And they go into this, and that's actually one of the points I found sort of interesting. I'll get to that later, but let me just continue a brief overview. So we follow her. She gets found out, of course. Soldiers come, they kill her mother. It's all very horrible. This happens on the first couple pages, so not a huge spoiler. And then she goes to prison of the Frost King. It's all very horrible. But then one night, two people, also Frostbloods, arrive, and they sort of give her a deal that they need her help for in exchange for her freedom, basically. And they abduct her. She agrees. They abduct her to a monastery, and there she gets to like train her fire powers because she's untrained, right? She had no Fireblood training. She didn't know any Firebloods, and so she gets like trained by like a frost power guy and his like hot nephew, or not actual nephew, but like there's a guy there, and that's
of course.
Yeah, I'll get into that maybe a little bit, but then it's revealed to her that they need her to kill the king, right?
The Frost King or
the Frost King, who's like super evil and stuff, and has been hunting down all the Firebloods.
How old is she?
She's 17. I remember this exactly. And it's, you know, it follows that kind of path. I'm just now at the point in the book where she's like at the court, but she kind of got there through subterfuge by being abducted and stuff. Of course, the monastery eventually gets raided by the soldiers. Everything goes to shit. And she's now like in the arena where Firebloods are put against the champions of the king and stuff. And it's all, it's actually kind of exciting at this point.
So the assassination of the king is going not great.
I was building up to this, okay? Because I have a little quiz for you. Because Vincent also has sort of fantasy novel expertise, okay? Because here's what I said to you was slightly wrong, but that's how the book presents it, right? The deal is, hey, Ruby, we need you to kill the king, right? And then they train her, but they don't reveal the entire plan to her. And then it is revealed that actually that was not true. They didn't need her to kill the king. It's another thing they need. And I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you some options and you pick which one you think it is. Okay.
Do they choice.
Yes, exactly. So in Frostblood, do they, instead of needing Ruby to kill the Frost King, do they A, need her to heal the Frost King, B, need her to melt the Frost Throne, C, need her to lift an ancient curse, or D, need her to fulfill the prophecy? What's your pick, Vincent?
I mean, some of these options are more exciting than others.
I agree.
It's a fantasy novel, so prophecy is always...
do it like this. Say which one you find most exciting and why, and then pick which one you find most likely.
Okay. Melting of the Frost Throne. I don't know what it does. I don't know why that would be important. I like it.
Yeah, it seems a bit arbitrary, like belligerent violence against objects. Like,
what was the third option? They need her to
lift an ancient curse.
Yes, exactly. And I was
Number
thinking
C.
Maybe it's not her doing the lifting, but rather her, like they need to sacrifice a Fireblood or something. That would be exciting because, right, there's drama and she needs to figure another option out. I think it's most likely the prophecy. It's a fantasy.
The prophecy?
Novel. Yeah.
Okay. And this is also your favorite option? Which one?
I think my favorite is the throne.
The throne, okay.
Also, you mentioned a nephew.
No, that was wrong. Not actual nephew, but
but fifth option, I was thinking that she might be the connecting link between the fire and Frostbloods, and they need her to bear a child or something like that.
I guess that's part of the prophecy. It's like you wrote. Did you read this book, Vincent? Okay, look. So I'm gonna reveal it to you now, okay?
Yes,
and I'm sorry, Vincent. It was a trick question. Haha.
Oh, no.
It was a trick question because the answer is all of the above.
Okay.
Because number one, the king is sick because he's not actually evil. He's just sort of been cursed. That's the curse, right? And the curse is sort of sequestered in his ancient frost throne, which has been cursing / making sick the whole lineage of Frost Kings. And Ruby is like the one binding peace between the Frost and Fire people that has been prophesied. Right? So
Yes.
it's like all of
Makes
these
sense.
things. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
just
it sounds exciting, honestly.
it's totally what you want from a fantasy book, right? And
100%.
I'm absolutely here for it. I was surprised by the book a little bit because it's so how do I put this without being negative? Like the whole fire and frost thing is so on the nose. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's just say we've seen that before, right? That's a very common trope in sort of fantasy, and there's no, from what I see, there's no like huge twist on it, right? She just throws like fireballs and like scorches people with heat, and the frost people can just freeze you and stuff.
Yeah.
It's what you would expect, and you know I've actually never seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? But that's also a big thing there, right? But they also have other elements.
Yes, they have water and fire, not frost and fire, but water
Sure,
people
yeah,
can
that's
still
right.
freeze you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just bringing it up because even though I've never seen it, I've heard quite a lot about it, and it always in my mind sort of seemed to be the thing that's like if you're gonna do elemental magic, that's the series that probably does it best. I
Yeah.
don't know. Would you agree?
Absolutely, because they also
Yeah.
incorporate the elements into the way that people are, and
Yeah.
they do a great job. Yes.
Which, to be fair, they do that here too. Like Ruby is, of course, very hot blooded, and like she like snaps at people all the time, and
Like any good protagonist of a
yes,
fantasy novel.
of course. But her, so I have to talk a little bit about Arcus, who I mistakenly label as the nephew. He's like, of course, like he's the buddy to the old mentor guy that trains her, right? And they both save her from prison, and he's like a total dick, of course.
How
Right.
old is he?
He's like 22, but he looks way
yeah.
older. And he's
Of
wearing a mask, and he has like a scar across his face. But he's like, yeah, I noted, like, okay, so what the author does, I think, very well, which I noticed, is that she keeps describing smells very vividly. And
that's
like,
cool.
yeah, no, and she does it consistently too. And you know, on the first couple pages, she will talk about like how bad the soldiers smell of like old sweat and like beer and stuff, and then like you know you don't like those guys. And then the moment, like because Ruby is in prison for like 8 months or whatever, and she's like all just skin and bones, right? She's deteriorated with regards to her physical condition. So like the Arcus guy, he has to like carry her and stuff. And at that moment, like he is described as smelling of like horse and leather. And so, and I knew, okay, this is the boyfriend. This is going to be the boyfriend guy.
Both are the two.
Yes, and surprise, surprise, you know, he shows up again at the monastery, and he has to like do training with her, and he's like, oh, hard. He you know, he's got a hard shell but a soft core. The like Frost Master tells Ruby, yeah, no, the Frost people, they do have emotions, they can't come out, you know, they're buried under the frost and stuff. And then of course they kind of hit it off, and I have to honestly, that was to me so far the sort of sloggiest lowest part of the novel.
The training part.
No, the training I liked. She has to like, you know, become really spiritual and like calm down her mind and like almost like pull more deep, like conquer fear and stuff, so she can control the fire and so on. That stuff I like. I mean, specifically the romance stuff with Arcus. It just felt a little bit melodramatic. Like I didn't. I get that they hit it off because they're teenagers and like there's no one else around, right? That's also the thing. Like this just sort of shitty monks that are not interesting and like not hot. Arcus is like the only fuckable guy in this monastery for this 17-year-old fire girl. So, you know, I don't know.
Is it obvious? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not right. How deep are his qualities really? But of course she's like by the end of the monastery segment, she's madly in love with them. They kiss and stuff. By the way, I think this might be like a young adult novel. I don't know. It's certainly not like Game of Thrones level, tits and dragons style, which is fine. Not everything needs to be that, right?
I mean, a lot of fantasy novels are young adult novels, and
I guess so.
they're good.
No, I mean, yeah, I totally mean that. I don't need everything to be fucking gruesome, cruel, horrible. What would you dark fantasy? I guess is what you would call Game of Thrones, right? Which I love. I love that too. Just don't need everything to be that. But that even though I have zero problems with like romance in my fantasy novels. I need that. That's part of what I want. It's just that those two, the chemistry didn't quite work out for me. At least not in the monastery part. Maybe they'll grow into it. I don't know. I'm sure they'll meet each other again in the arena or whatever.
Wait, did they end up together, or is that
they kiss.
sort of?
It's so adorable, really. Because it's like, oh, he's too cold and stuff, and she's too hot, and he's like afraid of fire. So it's kind of sweet, but just feels a little bit unearned, and it's too much. Just it feels a bit crammed in there, right? Like this has to happen at this point in the plot, and it's just part of what I like about fantasy novels is like constantly changing scenery. Right, and very big, vivid set pieces and stuff, and it's just a bunch of saints just in the monastery infirmary, and it's just there's not a lot of variety. But then that gets fixed once she gets to the arena, and I got way more excited about the novels then, and I'll probably continue reading it. At least the first one. I'll probably finish it.
Okay. How far are you in the first one?
I don't know, like chapter 22 or whatever, but I read it in this honest like fever haze, so I don't even know how many hours I spent. It might have been days, might have been weeks in that fucking monastery thinking about Arcus's frosty curls or whatever. I don't know. The one I wanted to point out one more thing, and then I'll swear I'll shut up about it. Oh yeah. By the way, I didn't point out why I read this particular novel, which is hilarious. I hinted at this, that there's a reason and a bridge for this one, and you're gonna laugh at me now. But the reason I wanted to read this is because it's an audiobook, right? And this is the book that is being read. I believe the whole series is being read by none other than Jennifer English of Baldur's Gate 3 fame. She is the voice behind Shadowheart. And that's why, that's the only reason I found this book, right? And I wanted to read it because I find Jennifer English's voice extremely listenable. Like, I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Just the quality of it is very good.
Is there a big difference between how she reads these books and how she speaks for Shadowheart, as Shadowheart?
Yes, I'm glad you asked, Vincent. I've thought about this a great deal. And number one, there's okay, the gut reaction you might have when you listen to Frostblood is to say, no, this is just Shadowheart. Jennifer English has one voice, and that's it, right? And but then once you read a little bit more, you realize that's not the case, and there's way more range in her voice in this, and of course she does voices, right? Which that's always hit or miss for me with like readers. I don't know how do you often read audiobooks, or do you read physical books primarily?
Well, in the recent years, it's sort of 50-50, I would say.
Right. But how do you feel about like people doing voices for certain characters, especially when the gender switches? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a breaking point.
If
it works, that's great, and if it doesn't, then that means I'm gonna probably switch to the physical book.
So imagine my confusion hearing Jennifer English's dulcet tones as she's trying to do a deep, gravelly Arcus Frost dude voice, right? And added to the general unfuckableness of this guy, like it just wasn't helping. I was not hot for Arcus, but it's like that stuff is always hit or miss. My favorite example for this is the audiobooks of Game of Thrones, read by, I believe, Roy Dotrice. who is an amazing reader, and I've probably listened for like upwards of 100 hours to this man read this grand epic story. But there also when he does like falsetto voice ladies that he does like the voice for it sometimes it's just it becomes involuntarily comical in a way, right? And that's not what he's going for, but that's how I sort of perceive it.
Really? Okay.
Because it's such a high voice, you know.
Uh-huh.
And he's like this old man who has this stately voice otherwise.
But do you mean that in a like? Does it work for you then, or do you?
It's
not
fine.
like it?
It's just I kind of it just makes me giggle a bit. Like it may just be me and I'm an idiot because I find that funny. But
Understandable. Yeah.
other than that, though, back to Frostblood, like she does a great job. And to your question specifically, are there difference between Baldur's Gate 3 and this? So after listening to it for a while and also being a little bit keen on voices and all that, right? People always say blind people get superpowers and your other senses get sharper. I have no superpowers, I assure you, except to be weirdly critical and snobby about voice actors, I guess. If I have a superpower, that's it. And
Okay, yeah,
here's
fair.
and I'm completely like might be talking out of my ass here, but from hearing her talk in Frostblood, I got the idea that it may have been part of the Baldur's Gate 3 direction for her voice acting, for Jennifer English's voice acting, to just tell her to never smile. Right? Which fits Shadowheart completely.
Yes.
Because I thought for that's what I mean with range, right? She will she manages quite well to give different characters sort of different personalities, and I feel like especially for Ruby as well, Ruby is a much more upbeat character than Shadowheart, and I feel, you know how you can sometimes hear even through the phone and stuff when people smile.
Yeah.
Right, I'm not imagining that. Right,
Yeah.
that's a thing, and like I could hear Jennifer English smile occasionally, which was alien and unknown to me from her Shadowheart performance. Right, the last thing I want to say about Frostblood, just one thing that stood out to me, which I find interesting, and I hadn't seen that in other fantasy novels, and I liked it. Is that how should I put this? They have this thing in the book where they have kind of an unknown or obscure or unreliable history. And by that I mean that the Frost faction, let's say, and the Fire faction, they're like at war, and there's a big division. They hate each other, right? But they can't quite agree on why that is or what happened, and there's a lot of arguing even about the basic historicity of their situation. You know what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah. I bet it's something like they were created at the same time. It was just like one family created them, and then
maybe.
they break apart.
I saw it more as a metaphor for our current highly divided political situation, and you can you don't even need to assign specific like real life factions to Fire and Frost, although you could. Like I'd be happy to, but I won't. But you know, I could think of many, right? Where also, you know, with social media and stuff, people can't even agree on a shared narrative at all, or even a framework within which to arrive at some kind of narrative. And they're sort of having the same thing in Frostblood, which I find interesting. And that was probably also the most interesting aspect of Ruby and Arcus's romance. How do they navigate their essentially political differences, right? And can they sort of sail past the bullshit, I guess? That's interesting from an interpersonal dynamic, sort of. But I also just like that as a thing in a fantasy novel. That it's probably not the first time this has happened, but you know what I mean? It's a little bit novel because I feel like, especially in fantasy, there's so much emphasis on like world building, and authors come up with their whole mythology and stuff, which Elly Blake does as well. There's plenty of the prophecy stuff and so on, but it's not that often that there's this sort of second layer of meaning to it. You know what I mean? Where you're not sure is the mythology even true. and in this case too, it's not like one of the Frost or Fire people is wrong and the other is right. At least it doesn't seem that way. It's just that history is inherently ambiguous in Frostblood.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other fantasy novels where that happens, and I feel like what happens mostly is that there's some part of history that is sort of ambiguous, or there's the protagonist eventually finds out that there was some secret kept hidden, like in Aragon, where he finds out about how dragons come to be and stuff like that.
Sure, but it always eventually comes out, right?
Yeah, and it never, or in many cases, it doesn't really, it doesn't really change the political structure. It just impacts the protagonist and his personal quest mostly. And I wonder if that's gonna happen here, because I do, man. I read a book about. There was sort of modern fantasy where someone gets dragged into a world of elves.
Sounds dope.
Yeah, the German title was Blumenkrieg.
Ah, okay. Don't know that one.
Like Flower War.
Yeah.
And that's the only one I can remember where something like that happens. Where there's a they have a monastery. Monastery?
I like it. Yes, a fan of monasteries in general.
Sorry, not a monastery, but a king and a queen.
I hate it now.
Sorry.
Why do you have to take that away?
The monastery they have is a giant nightclub where a lot of drugs get used.
Oh, that's cool. Someone should make a Berlin nightclub and just call it Monastery.
Yes.
That would totally work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but the king and queen are always like somewhere in the distance, but nobody has seen them in quite a while, and there is political drama going on, and the things that are revealed eventually do change the entire that fictional world quite a lot.
Right.
But that's the only one I can think of.
I have one more example, not from books but from games, where something like this happened, and I liked it as well. And that's in Dragon Age, actually. In Dragon Age, correct me if I'm wrong. At least I've only played the first one, but they have this.
Me too. So no.
There you go. As always, we know our shit. They have this thing called the Chantry, right, which is the in-fiction religion. And I don't know if it's monotheistic or whatever. It seems very sort of churchy, Catholic Church style. Not so much polytheism temples like in D&D and stuff. But the thing, though, in Dragon Age, and again, other fantasy games, etc., they don't often do this. It's not clear in fiction whether the Chantry is real or not, or the god, I guess, they're praying to is real. Right, it might just be a social institution and stuff, and I don't think it gives you any magic powers at all. It's like a purely social thing, and it's up to you whether you believe it or not. Just like faith in real life, I guess.
True. Even they do have Templars, if I recall correctly, and they do not have the paladin powers, right? Where they have some magical abilities. No, they're just dudes with swords.
Yeah, just like in real life, right? Like Knights of the Church, I guess. Yeah, which that's at least, it's not super. I guess it's kind of ambiguous as well, just like in Frostblood. But there's certainly this second layer of meaning to it, right? Where it's not everything is just upfront. Yeah, this is a god and he gives you frost power if you pray to him, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's Frostblood. I don't know. It's if you like fantasy novels, read it, I guess.
So, what would you give it out of 10?
I'm not going to rate it because I haven't finished it. I think that would be unfair. I think I will finish the first book, Vincent, and I'll get back to you with my book report.
I look forward
maybe I'll have more to say about it. But it's fun. It's been a while since I've just read a proper fantasy novel. I think the last one I read was actually the Erilyn Moonblade saga, about which I have much to say. And maybe one day we'll have nothing to talk about, and then I will talk about that. That's like a classic Forgotten Realms novel and stuff. Also about a young woman with magic powers and who like finds a cool boyfriend, and they have a weird relationship. But that's
part of it.
I'll talk about that if we ever talk about that book, because those actually had a. Well, it was sort of toxic and weird as well, but in a more interesting way. Like, I liked the romance in that one, is my point.
Okay.
Although it was generally not as well written, I have to say.
Ah, okay. That's
And
a
I know
point for
that's-
Frostblood.
Yeah, it is. Okay, yeah, let me say this. It's a well written novel, right? It's like really narratively tight, and there's none of the awkward shit that's definitely in stuff like Erilyn Moon. What do I mean? I mean, like, shit that's just confusing. Like, I believe Elaine Cunningham is the author of the Erilyn novels, and I fucking love those books. Like, I don't mean to be negative, but sometimes she just writes shit that's incomprehensible and does like lots of head hopping, like plot wise. I just can't follow it. Like the schemes of some merchant prince or whatever, and it's just not clear. And she does lots of head hopping in the same scene and stuff.
What do you mean by head hopping?
That you
Perspective changes?
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
So
God.
I believe the Erilyn books are also there in first person, but then within a chapter she will jump to other people's perspective, and that can get jarring, in my opinion. And it did for me, at least.
I've read quite a bit of like poorly written stuff by amateur authors, and every time one of them tries to change perspective, it's like in 95% of the times it's a really bad idea and poorly executed. For some reason, it seems to be really hard to do that.
You gotta start a new chapter, right? That's the way to do it if you want to do it. I mean, the Game of Thrones books pull it off, right?
Yeah, and maybe that's it. And I'm not. There are plenty of examples where it works well. It seems to be the difference between a experienced and good author and an amateur, inexperienced author. That this is the perspective changing is one of the points where you immediately can tell, okay, this author is not very experienced.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like solid craft, right?
Yeah.
Somehow, yeah, I agree. I don't know what it is. I guess it's a kind of formal restriction you put on yourself, right? Sort of arbitrarily, kind of like, oh, in music or whatever, I'm going to stay in a certain time signature, like write a waltz or whatever, and you wouldn't just willy-nilly switch that in the middle of the song either.
Yeah.
But here's the difficult thing, except when you do,
Yes.
right?
If you're very good, you
yes,
can do that.
and then if you're a real master, you know that sometimes you can do that, but there's like nuances to that stuff, and you have to prepare that, and there's like lots of soft factors that will make that good.
Yeah.
And the same is true for literature, because I can't think of an example now, but I'm sure there are instances where head hopping is totally fine. But yeah, in the vast majority, like, why do you need it, right? Like, why can't you craft your scenes in a way where the information gets across without the interior of the other person?
The one good example I can think of immediately is Lord of the Rings, where you have the actual Lord of the Rings is divided into, I think, 6 books.
Doesn't that have an omniscient third-person narrator?
Maybe, man, it's been a long while since I've read those.
So,
But
Big Confession comic, I've never read those books.
you monster.
I know. I've read like segments and stuff, but I've never just sat down and read Lord of the fucking Rings.
So yeah, I guess you're right. It's not really a perspective change, but the perspective changes in that regard, that we look at other parts of the story.
Yeah, sure. But that's part of his slightly, I'm going to say it is archaic. Maybe it's not. I haven't read it, but that's how it always came across to me, right? It's an old book as well. And like back in the day, I mean, that's kind of gotten out of style, that omniscient type narrator. Right? It sounds a bit old fashioned in a way.
Yeah.
Which I'm not, like, maybe they should bring it back. I don't know. I can tell you that I'm sort of over all these first-person narrators. And yeah, Frostblood does that as well, right? But it's like that's so. Just from what I gather, that's just what the industry wants from you now, like the book industry. Like if you're gonna, especially young adult novels, it has to be first-person narrator, and it has to be voicey, right? It has to be really like the personality and character needs to come through in the description and stuff. And that's what they want. And it's just a bit tiring if everything is like that. I don't know.
I mean.
It's okay in this book. It's not like annoyingly voicey, but it's definitely going for that style.
Yeah, I should read Lord of the Rings again, but I think the difference is just young adult novels are really set up so you can self-insert to some extent.
Yeah, you want to identify with. I agree.
Nobody wants to self-insert in Lord of the Rings, not because
no, like I don't know. I want to be Gandalf.
I mean, sure, you want to be Gandalf, but that's not the way that the book is written. Right?
I don't care. It's the power of my imagination, Vincent.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
What's going to happen? Is the Tolkien estate going to sue me because I dress up as Gandalf?
No, it's just it's set up in a way where you naturally don't want to be Gandalf or anybody in the party, I think. But hey, if your desire to be a wizard angel character is that strong, go for it.
Yes, that is my desire.
I know,
Vincent.
I know.
Yeah, I know what you mean, though, about Lord of the Rings.
I'm gonna get your wizard set one day. Unless you already.
I mean, I can send you some links with my wish list. It's not like I haven't picked out robes and shit, like from the medieval clothes store.
Yeah, well,
I forget what it's called. I should
start your OnlyFans first, and then we'll.
Yeah, I do. Or Cameo, don't they have that? Where I dress up as a wizard and greet people.
Oh yeah.
I give cool wizard greetings.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess that we're done with this topic. That was Frostblood, everyone. Go check it out. If you get sick, you should read this book. And you will probably... No, this is not medical advice. Don't listen to me.
Frostblood fixes all your ailments.
Yeah, no, don't say that. We're going to get claimed on YouTube.
So the Hood of the Weave was very rare. It also said, worn by the wizard Tensor when he was inducted into the Circle of Eight.
Whoa.
After the ceremony in which his fellow wizards Otiluk and Bigby played a trick on Tensor, the two pranksters found their party vodka spiked with a spell that transformed their earlobes into cynical pixies.
Wow, that must be horrible. They keep talking to you? That's such a... Holy shit.
That is such a withered thing.
I know, all of it. They kept going on giving Tensor wedgies and stuff. And he's like, well, I will horribly traumatize you for life now. Also, then I made a cool hood and wrote the story on it.
Yeah. Lol.
And I love that this necromancer dude just randomly has this. Yeah. And this is great. I love these classic OGs, man. Tensor is an OG wizard.
Yeah, and so are Bigsby and
I know,
Otiluk.
but I can see that why they make fun of him, because they have actually very useful spells. And all that Tensor has is this dumb disc. It's in every D&D edition and never used.
It's just imagine, everybody could do that before him, but he never really figured out his spell of his own, so they just called it Tensor's floating disc.
Yeah. No, do you know why it's called Tensor's floating disc?
Why?
Because that's the only magical floating disc where you can't do the one obvious thing, which is to climb on top of it as a wizard and lord over people. Because I don't think in any edition you can climb on the disc. And probably every other wizard can do that. And just Tensor's disc is the special needs disc. Yeah, Tensor is my favorite wizard. I mean, to be fair, he does have Tensor's transformation, which, come to think of it, is probably just a safety thing they made him do
Wait, what
so
does
he
that
doesn't
do?
get hurt. Tensor's transformation just turns
turns
you
him-
into a buff knight, kind of like with an armor and stuff.
Yeah.
When wizards
That's
attack, is,
better for him and for the other wizard.
yeah.
Put that staff down, Tensor.
Tensor just transform for this one, okay?
We need actual magic.
Now you're gonna go into your final form.
Wow.
Yeah.
To transition to our other topic, the thing that it did really well, exploration, reminded me of my favorite game of all times, Gothic.
Right.
And because at some point I became frustrated with Dragon's Dogma, I decided to go back into that. And that is such a good game.
Yeah, Vincent played Gothic 1, and I know Gothic 1. I've heard a lot of Gothic 1. We have some friends who are very into Gothic and stuff. But the interesting thing is Vincent has never played Gothic 1, which always surprised me.
Yeah,
Just a shitload of Gothic 2.
Yeah, I played, I don't know, probably like 500 hours of Gothic 2.
And I'm sort of the opposite. I'm your mirror. I've played way more Gothic 1. So I'm interested. How did you find it? It's a famously sort of punishing game at the start.
Yeah, well, a lot of knowledge translates, right?
Yeah, sure. The weird combat system and stuff.
totally.
You're already familiar with that.
Although I have to say, navigating Gothic 1 is even more difficult than Gothic 2.
Just because of like monsters and stuff in the environment.
No, because how you actually move your characters.
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. There's
Doesn't it expect you to use tank controls with the arrow keys? Like as a default?
I think so. I use WASD.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the default though.
Don Solarione, hello guys.
Hey,
Hey, hi.
welcome to the show. We're talking about Gothic 1 right now.
A 25-year-old game.
Yeah,
It's great.
literally older than some of our viewers probably.
Yeah.
But it's a classic though.
What they did was that, for example, to pick up items in Gothic 2, you have to like click your mouse,
Right.
as you would expect, right? In Gothic 1, you have to hold control
Yeah.
and click forward.
Yeah, they do that a lot. It's very idiosyncratic, very, very specific to their own way of doing things.
Yes. And that took me a while, and then I found an option to turn on Gothic 2 controls. That's way better. And I still haven't really. I fought like twice so far, and mostly it's just been in NPC interactions and talking and all that stuff.
Right. So the setup of the game, if I remember correctly, is that there is an island, and on that island
Greenness,
is a prison colony in which you at the start of the game are thrown, and on that island also is like magical ore that people mine to exchange with like the king. And also there's been a rebellion and the prisoners are now sort of in charge of this prison colony, but there's this whole sort of agreement between the king and the prisoners that they get to do their own thing in their little colony as long as the ore is flowing, right? The spice must flow, etc. And there's also a war with orcs, which are a problem. That's why the king needs the ore.
Yeah.
Is that right? That's sort of the setup of Gothic.
Yeah, one important detail is that the king sort of separated the mine with the help of wizards. He made a giant glowing orb around it, and
Yeah, that's a shield that I mentioned.
Yeah, nobody can get out.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
the
That's
wizards
important.
and
You can get
all the
in,
prisoners-
and they can send supplies in, and they do,
Yeah.
but you can't get out. And then the game starts brilliantly, in my opinion. It's very iconic in my mind, at least. You literally get sort of thrown down a cliff into like a lake, and that's how you enter this prison colony. And then you're just on your own, and it just goes from there. And it's it's a great setup, and it's actually kind of interesting how many RPGs start you as a prisoner or a criminal of some sort, right?
Yeah, it just-
Bethesda also does that in literally every Elder Scrolls game.
It works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you also at the beginning of the game you get a scroll, a letter for the leader of the fire mages, which you have to get to.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
And it's up to you, right? That was also an RPG that gave you a lot of freedom, even in a time where, like technically there's a lot of challenges they were facing, but it's a kind of for its time well-made game, and it gave you a lot of freedom. And I think you can go to that guy or not and choose other factions to ally with in the game.
Yeah.
But that's by the way sort of what I was getting at, because I wanted to ask you, where are you by now in the game? How far did you play it?
So I spent a while sort of modding it just to get it to run on current PCs. I didn't actually, I tried to avoid any gameplay changes.
Sure.
But
So you got to the loading screen, basically.
no, I actually, so there are 3 sort of camps in the world.
Yeah.
The new camp, the old camp, and the religious camp.
The swamp people who smoke weed all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I made it to the old camp, which is the central castle in the middle that used to belong to the
wardens or
militia
something,
and the
right?
wardens
Yeah.
and the fire mages, and that is now overtaken by the prisoners who have taken the armor of the wardens, and that's
Yeah,
where
they're tough guys with lots of power.
that's where I have spent most of the time. Basically,
Okay.
I've just
I see. So still pretty much at the start of the game.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I try to avoid any fights because I am weak.
Yeah.
And just spend
You're
a lot of time.
very weak at the start of this game.
Talking,
Like
yeah.
literally, if you leave that camp and you go out and you see some critters
Kunstnos
around.
_ was get.
What?
Oh, that's German. Was geht?
Oh, welcome to the show. Yeah, the screen reader will read that in English, so keep that in mind. Welcome to talking about Gothic right now. But yeah, I was saying, it's so punishing that even if you leave that camp and just see some critters around and you start beating on them, they will fuck you up. Like, maybe not you, because you know how the weird combat mechanics work. But it's still challenging, right? Like it's not like other RPGs, and certainly not like a Bethesda RPG where the world is scaled to your level. The Gothic will have none of that. Like they have set up a certain difficulty in certain spots in the game, and that's how it is and will be forever. So you'll either, if you pick the right enemies, you'll have easy fights or at least doable ones. If you pick the wrong ones, you'll get your ass handed to you.
Yeah.
And it stays that way. And they also don't respawn if you kill them.
Yeah, there are videos of people trying, and at least in the for the second one, of trying to kill an orc. At the beginning of the game, and it's just like a 40-minute video of him running away, hitting once, running away, hitting once, running away.
Yeah.
And that's like 40 minutes.
The thing is, the game will let you do that, and like, I don't think there's any. I mean, certainly for like story reasons and stuff, like other acts and stuff are gated behind certain events. Sure. But
there's also like at every new chapter there are some respawning enemies and stuff like that.
That's right.
Worlds.
As I was saying, it doesn't respawn. I remembered. Oh, that's actually not completely true. So thank you for correcting that.
The thing is, it's not really respawning. It's just spawning different or new enemies.
Yeah, it's true. It's just like time progresses.
Yeah.
And that they have, it was all technical limitations back in the day, but they made it work.
Yeah.
And the world changes over time as the story progresses. But if I'm not mistaken, even from the very start, there's not a lot of, or even any hard gating when it comes to locations, right? And if you want to get past a super tough orc to get to whatever is behind him, and you have to do that by cheesing the game and sitting there for 8 hours hit and running this orc, I think you can totally do that.
Yeah.
I mean, you may not want to do that, and it might not be a good idea, but the game lets you. And I kind of like that. And I kind of like
I
their
love it,
approach to design in RPGs.
I completely agree. I think this is because in this game, every single enemy is put there with thought. Right, it's not just randomly generated world or randomly generated village.
Well, which nothing against that if your whole game is that, right? But
sure, but in this case, it's all made.
It fits with. It's put there with love.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if you encounter an enemy that just absolutely destroys you, well, you're probably not supposed to be there. And I love that. And at the same time, you have the option of going there or cheesing it or doing whatever.
Yeah, and if you're clever, you can figure it out. I mean, kind of like in Baldur's Gate 3, right? They also let you get past fights if you're clever. It's just that, I mean, it's a weird comparison. Gothic 1 and Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, well, to be fair, every game I play, I compare to Gothic. So,
Yeah, because that has formed your basis,
Yes,
right,
yes.
for everything, which makes sense. It's just like, yeah, of these two, one looks a little bit better than the other one.
What do
I'm
you
sure.
mean?
Yeah,
Just
I know.
because his head is a square thing?
5 polygons. Like, yeah. But both of them have this ethos where they let you get past stuff if you're clever. But also, I think Baldur's Gate 3, if we are willing to make that comparison, is probably a little bit better for the new player experience, right? I do see that
Probably.
problem that if you're not as weird and hardcore as us, or as damaged, if you want to put it that way, if you start up playing Gothic 1 and it's everything is just so frustrating and hard, and you can't make heads or tails of it, and maybe you don't have just the ability to do the weird Twitch
Yeah.
combat,
And
you might just put that game down, right?
yeah, totally. I don't really know that Gothic 1 that well, but in Gothic 2, if you even eat the wrong food at the beginning, you fuck yourself over.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
And the thing is, it's designed as a linear story sort of game, so it doesn't even have that saving grace of, well, dying and making mistakes is fun because then you just restart and the whole game is generated and it's all built around that. That's not the case here, right? You're just screwed and you have to reload.
Yeah. But to be fair, what you can do is what I was missing in Dragon's Dogma is you can make different decisions,
Yeah,
which I love.
totally an RPG thing.
Not only in what path you choose in the game, in the main story, right? You can, I'm talking about Gothic 2 now because I know that well. You can be a wizard or a mercenary, basically, or a militia. Not only that, but one of my favorite parts in this game is the very first real quest, which is basically just get into the city. That's it.
Right, in Gothic 2.
Yeah, in Gothic
Yeah.
2.
And you can do that in many ways. And
Yeah,
they've
but
put a lot of thought into that.
Exactly, and you think, okay, right? You just follow the path, and then you get to the gate, and the guards tell you, no, fuck off, and you figure out, okay, there's a farmer, and you can talk to him, and if you help him, you get like apprentice clothes, and then you can get into the city. Super straightforward, works easy.
Yeah, or you can do what I did, which is to do the stupid video game thing and find some world geometry where you can sort of stuck yourself over the walls, and the game also accounts for that. So
yeah, or you can find a hidden passage into a part of the jungle where your friend sits, surrounded by wolves, basically. And if you help him kill the wolves, then he gives you another path into the city.
Yeah.
Or there are a lot of different ways.
I'm excited to see you play more Gothic, Vincent, or at least to hear about it.
Oh, dude, I've never played Gothic 1.
Yeah.
And like the moment I actually was done with the modding and started playing, just from that moment until now, there's like 20% of my brain is constantly occupied with the thought of, I could be playing Gothic right now.
Interesting, yeah.
It's I love
fascinating
these games
what
so
magical
much.
pull that has on us,
Yes.
right? Yeah, very. But I'm genuinely interested to hear more because I also have some fondness for that game. Maybe not quite as much as you or our other friends who are into the Gothic series, but I do remember it, and I remember some, let's say, interesting / frustrating story beats in Gothic 1. So I want to hear about you encountering those without spoiling anything.
I am curious about that because, as we said, right, Gothic is very good at fucking you over
It
if you
is.
are not prepared.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I had to reload once already because I met a character named Mud, which you might know.
In what camp is that? The old camp?
In the old camp, yeah.
Okay.
So he's right next to the entry of the castle, basically. And he basically is just an annoying friend. And he follows you around and constantly talks to you.
Oh, that's like Nuber in Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, funny. I guess that's a trope in RPG.
And I let that happen for about 15 minutes. And at some point, I figured, okay, I need this to stop.
Yeah.
Either I can kill him, which I can't because I'm super weak, or what other options are there to get this to stop?
Yeah.
And I eventually had to look it up, and the consensus is, well, you can just endure him.
He
or you
stops
can-
eventually on his own.
No, you can endure him until you can kill him,
Ah,
basically. Or he's like the one character that nobody will mind if you beat him.
Yeah.
If you beat
Yeah,
any other NPC, the others will
Intervene,
come for you. Yes.
Of course, but everyone hates mud, so
Exactly.
it's okay. Do they have that thing in the game where you can beat someone up without weapons and that's not lethal?
Not only that, I think unless they are like specifically bandits, fighting any NPC is non-lethal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then you have
Interesting.
to actively execute them.
Ah,
basically.
okay. That I didn't even know that. I guess I never tried back in the game, but back in the day. But that seems like a good choice.
Yeah, totally. And if you ever execute anybody in a camp, that's bad news for you.
But you can do that, right?
mean,
You can
sure.
declare war on an entire
yeah.
camp, and
Uh-huh.
that it's
100%.
completely possible to keep playing.
Might even be beneficial for you if you decide this camp needs to die and
Yeah.
you want the XP. There you go.
Yeah.
It's a possibility. Yeah. But
Yeah,
that was the
well-
one time where I had to eventually just reload and just avoid him for now. It's
Right.
just, I can't deal with that.
That's fair. I mean, the game is sort of designed around reloading as well.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I'll be excited to hear more about it next time, Vincent. Although next time probably we'll have lots of other things to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But we'll get to that when we get to it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the A Dungeon About podcast. We record live usually every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central European Time on Twitch, twitch.tv/hemakesmeplay_live. You can also watch some of our Let's Plays and other videos we create on the He Makes Me Play YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@hemakesmeplay. And you can also follow us on Twitter @makes_play. Thanks everyone. See you next time.